You feel like you're spinning plates at work and at home. You're struggling to understand why your team at work and your family at home don't connect with you the way that you want. It's like you're speaking different languages, and no matter how hard you try, it's just not working. You're a leader at work, but when you step into your home, you don't feel respected, you don't feel understood. And it's frustrating because you're trying to be everything for everybody, but the results aren't matching the effort. Today, I'm going to teach you how to master emotional intelligence so that you can change the way you lead, not just at work, but at home too.
Leaders are not born in a womb. They are forged through heat, pressure, and a whole lot of sweat. The Fire Forged Leader podcast serves the audience through exploring leadership at work, in the community, and with the family, using a practical perspective and real-life experiences from the host, Steve Baumgartner, and his guests in The Forge. Now, it's time to enter the Forge with the Fire Forged Leader.
This week at work was one of those rare moments where everything started clicking. You know that feeling when all the effort you've been putting into something finally pays off? In this new role, I've been working hard to build trust with my team, figure out the dynamics, and lead in a way that feels genuine and authentic. And this week, it all came together. My meetings ran smoothly, ideas flowed, and I walked away feeling like I was finally hitting my stride. But as I made the drive to our home in Kansas City, after the week, the weight of being separated from my family, from my wife and kids during this relocation, it hit me hard. I walked into a house full of stress. My wife was overwhelmed, and she was doing everything to try and keep everybody together. But the kids were bouncing off the walls after being snowed in for days. And they were all looking to me to bring the stability, to be the leader in the home. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't bring the best version of myself through the door that night. I was tired, I was short-tempered, and I was emotionally not present. And the truth is, the guy who walked into the house was not that same calm, composed leader that my team saw earlier in the week. I realized that while I'd made progress at work, I was still falling short at home. That's when it hit me. Being an effective leader isn't just about what I do in the office. It's about showing up with emotional intelligence everywhere, especially where it matters most, in your home. So guys, I threw around this couple of words called emotional intelligence. And it's important that we define these couple of words because they're thrown around a lot in today's world. And a lot of people don't know exactly what they mean. Let's be honest. You know, people in HR want to throw it around. This person's got low emotional intelligence. Okay, define it for me so I can fix it. But they never do. They never do. What they do is they just call it a problem and say, you need to work on your emotional intelligence, right? And that's what HR people do because they don't lead. All right? They don't lead. So let's talk about emotional intelligence a little bit and what it really means here. So what is it? It's simply the ability to recognize and understand your own emotions, triggers, and behaviors. All right. The ability to understand your own emotional abilities and triggers. It's a focus on self, and that's important. That's important to understand. So why does that matter? Without self-awareness, it's absolutely impossible to manage your emotions effectively or show up consistently for others. That's why it's important. So there's some practical steps I want to talk about with emotional intelligence and really just getting to know yourself. So let's start off with a morning check in. I want you to, before your day even begins, I want you to ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling that way? Why did I wake up with a chip on my shoulder? Why did I wake up joyous? Why did I wake up tired or groggy or worn out already before the day even began? Why is that? And I want you to write that down. I want you to write that down. I want you to write down a few sentences about your mental state. I want you to write a few sentences about your emotional state. And it's important. It's important to do this, guys. I know that we grew up in these households, especially if you're a Gen Xer like me, right? You don't write shit down. You don't journal. That's stuff for girls. Yeah, bullshit, guys. Call it whatever you want. Call it journaling. Call it reflecting. Call it whatever. But we need to get in touch with ourselves emotionally, right? We need to understand our emotions so that we can lead better out in the field. And then we get to the end of the day. And at the end of the day, I need you to reflect on your emotional wins, but I also want you to think about your challenges throughout the day. Your emotional challenges. Did you handle the situations in your day well? What could have you done better? And I can't stress the importance of doing this, because really what you're doing is you're identifying patterns in yourself. What you're doing when you look back through those pages, or even when you think about it, you're looking for recurring triggers that set you off or moments that elevate your mood. For instance, if you're often frustrated in meetings, I need you to consider what's behind it, right? Do you feel unheard? Do you feel like you're getting unclear goals? Do you feel like you're being interrupted? It's important to think about these things, guys. It's important because when we know ourselves, when we know what sets us off, we can do something to control that. However, when we know where we feel joy or we're feeling respected or whatever, we can seek out more of those. It's a good understanding of our own personal feelings so that we can control it better, so that we can lead better. The next part of emotional intelligence is empathy. And this is where we start to understand others. So let's talk about empathy a little bit and about what it is. So empathy is the ability to step into someone else's shoes and truly understand their perspective. What we want to do is really build trust and bridge gaps in communication, whether it's with your team or your family. We want to step inside and really practice active listening. And here's an active listening exercise for you. So during conversations, I want you to focus entirely on the other person. Now, I know this is hard. I know this is hard. You know, this guy with ADHD, he's got the squirrels going. He's got the squirrels going. It is hard to sit there and just listen. But what we're doing is we're trying to listen for understanding, okay? We're not planning out a response while they're talking. We're just listening. We can ask some clarification questions along the way. And, you know, especially for me, this helps me stay on track. It helps me get the squirrels back in the cage. And then once that they're done, I want you to repeat back what they said, what their concern was, whatever. I want you to repeat it back, what you heard, so that you can confirm their understanding or your understanding of what they just said, excuse me. So, for a practical example, right? For a really practical example, when my wife shares that she's overwhelmed, you could respond by saying something like, it sounds like you're juggling a lot right now, honey. And that's stressing you out. Is that right? And we want to say it in a manner that we're paraphrasing or we're conceptualizing what they just said. We don't want to repeat it word for word because that becomes condescending. We want to be able to repeat it in a way that it shows that we understood. And we want to practice curiosity, guys. I don't know what's wrong with me today. I cannot speak. But we need to practice curiosity. We need to ask open-ended questions like, what's been the hardest part of your week? What do you need me to do to support you right now, honey? What can I do to support you right now? Do you need me to listen? Do you need me to do something? Do you need me to give you space? Do you need me to hold you? What support do you need from me right now? And I'm going to tell you guys, I'm not the greatest at this. I am not the greatest at this. But I've had my moments, right? I've had my moments of greatness. So when someone's upset, what I want you to do is acknowledge their emotions instead of immediately trying to solve their problem. And this is something that I really have a hard time with because I'm a problem solver. That's what I do. I was a troubleshooter in my career for decades. I'm a troubleshooter in my role now. I'm a troubleshooter with men. It's what I do. I solve problems. But that's not always what people need. That's not what your wife needs. A phrase like, I can see how that would be frustrating. I can see how frustrated you are, and I understand that. That can go a long way in a relationship. And I want you to keep that in mind. Practice empathy. The next part of this is relationship management, which means simply to build stronger connections. So, what is relationship management? It's really the ability to foster healthy, productive relationships by managing conflict. All right? But also nurturing trust. So it's important to understand the managing conflict part because that's generally what hurts relationships. It's not the good times. It's not the good times, guys. It is when we have conflict in a relationship. It's when we have conflict with our wife, with our employees, with our coworkers, with our peers. That's when relationship management really matters. People follow leaders they trust and respect, whether that's your team at work or your family at home. It matters, guys. Managing relationships matters. So I want you to set aside some regular one-on-one time with key people in your life. And that could be your wife. That could be your workers, your employees. So at work, have a 15-minute check-in with a team member to discuss their goals and concerns. Don't wait till the end of the year. I had a whole podcast on that. It should never be a surprise when you talk to your employees. It should never be a surprise. At home, I want you to plan 10 to 15 minutes of uninterrupted time with your spouse. I want you to also do the same thing with your kids without distractions, guys. My wife and I have had a routine for years where we get together and we read the Gospels every morning. It is the best time in the world for our relationship. But if she's distracted or if I'm distracted, we notice, and it's hurtful. So you need to make sure that you give that time. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but it has to be intentional, wholly intentional. And then this one's probably going to make you sick, guys, but I want you to master the art of apologizing. All right. So this isn't about being weak. What I need you to do is I need you to openly own your mistakes. For example, with your wife, it might be something like, hey, I realize I was short with you earlier. That wasn't fair to you, and I'm sorry. You know, that builds trust. It demonstrates humility. And you don't have to apologize for things that you don't do. But if you lose your temper, you sure as hell can apologize for that. If you're short with your wife, you can apologize for that. Even if she did something that you responded to, you can still apologize for what you did. So here's a little conflict resolution formula that I want to give you today. So step 1, stay calm and listen without interrupting. All right. Stay calm and listen without interrupting. Step number 2 is validate the other person's perspectives. That's what they believe. Validate what they believe. And then step 3 is collaborate on a solution that works best for both parties, right? It doesn't matter. Guys, I'm telling you right now, with my wife, if I fight to win, I will win. But does it do me any good? Absolutely not. But when we collaborate on a solution, when we buy into it, both of us at the same time, that's gold, guys. It's absolute gold. And now we come to social awareness. So social awareness is really the ability to recognize the emotions and dynamics in a group. You know, when you're in a group setting, you can look across the group. You can try and figure out what the emotions, the dynamics, sorry, I'm repeating myself, but you can see all this stuff and you adapt yourself accordingly. For example, if you walk into a room and there's already some tension, you know that you need to be a conflict manager. If you walk into a room and people are smiling and laughing, you can start with a joke and kind of lead in a little bit different, but you need to understand how to read a room. And a lot of people don't understand that. You know, they come in and they're just, I'm me and that's who I am. And that's not leadership, guys. You need to adapt to your environment. So why does this matter? Why does this matter? Great leaders, they sense shifts in energy or morale, and they adjust their approach. And what they do by adjusting their approach is they keep the group aligned and they keep the group motivated. So here's some practical steps once again. Observe nonverbal cues. This is very, very important. You need to pay attention to body language, people's tone of voice, and their facial expressions. And you do all that during the conversations. Are they engaged? Are they listening? Are they angry? Are they irritated? These are all things that you need to keep in the forefront. And that brings us to self-regulation, which is really mastering your own reactions. So this is the ability to control your emotional responses and stay composed under pressure. And this one is huge, guys. Your ability to manage your emotions directly impacts how others perceive you and respond to you. So we're going to practice some more practical steps here. The first one is the pause. All right, the pause, the big pause. So when emotions are running high, what people are looking for is a reaction. Don't give it to them. Don't give it to them. That is a fight or flight sort of response. So instead, what I want you to do is when emotions are running high, I want you to take 10 seconds to pause, to breathe, and to decide. Pause, breathe, decide. This gives you a chance to decide how you want to respond. So if a team member challenges you in a meeting, they're all and they challenge you in a meeting, I don't want you to react defensively. I want you to pause. I want you to breathe. And I want you to respond. And maybe the response is, hey, you know what? That's a different idea. That's an interesting perspective. Let's talk about that a little bit and give them a platform to talk. Yeah, you might not agree with it, but I guarantee you that most of the time when people have that platform, what happens is that they think through it and generally they'll agree with, what you're thinking. And then we need to reframe our negative thoughts. When frustrations arise, I want you to reframe the situation. For example, instead of thinking, something like, why do I always have to handle this? Right? I have a friend right now who's dealing with this. I want you to change that thought to, you know what? This gives me a chance to demonstrate leadership to this person. And that's huge, guys. It's huge. Our mindsets trap us in prisons that we don't want to be in. And then practice some stress release rituals, okay? Guys, very, very important. When you're leading all the time. You lead at work, you lead at home, you lead out in your community. It's everything that we talk about. We need to figure out how to de-stress sometimes because it's also a lot of responsibility and it's a lot of stress. So you need to figure out how you can decompress. You can't go all the time. I'm telling you that right now. I go all the time, but I need to de-stress. I need to decompress. And I do that sometimes. Sometimes I plug in and I crank up the radio. Sometimes I turn the radio off and I breathe. Sometimes I just drive longer. Sometimes I go out to eat by myself. There's a lot of different ways that I do it. But I want you to figure out what works for you. It could be a quick walk. It could be journaling. It could be breathing exercises. But this all keeps our emotions in check and it prevents that leadership burnout. All right, guys, we've done a lot of talking about emotional intelligence overall. We've done a lot of talking. I told you what it is. I told you about different portions of it. I told you some little tips along the way. But now I want to get into a short framework, a short framework so that you can actually start to work on this because I want to give you value every time that you listen to the show. So here's the value that I want to give you today. The framework to build emotional intelligence. All right. And let's start off by talking about step one. It's a pretty good place to start. Anyways, step one is observation. Awareness comes first. All right. So pay attention to what's happening emotionally within yourself, both with yourself and with others. I want you to ask yourself internally, what am I feeling right now? Where in my body do I feel it? This might be as simple as getting a feelings chart to pinpoint specific emotions. Guys, we're not great with emotions, but we need to become good with them to be able to lead well. And then the second half of this observation is the external. I want you to watch for nonverbal cues in others. Body language, tone of voice, facial expressions. Last week, my wife seemed unusually quiet during dinner. Instead of brushing it off, I paused and observed her body language. She was tense. Her tone felt distant. That observation set the stage for meaningful connection, guys. Meaningful connection. And I want you to practice that. Stop and observe. Don't always get butt hurt. Like, what's wrong with you down there? You got a problem with me? Right? Instead, observe. Step number 2 is reflect. I want you to understand before you act. I want you to take time to consider why emotions are present. What's causing the reaction in yourself or in other people? I want you to ask questions. Why am I feeling this way? Is this about the situation at hand, or is it something deeper? Is it a problem that I had with my youth, for example? And I want you to practice empathy. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. What might they be experiencing? What unmet need could be driving their behavior? So after observing my wife's mood, I reflected on what could be causing it. And I realized that she had been managing the kids all day while being snowed in. And that was exhausting and stressful for her. And recognizing that allowed me to approach the situation with empathy rather than defensiveness. Now, I'll tell you, I didn't do that very well. I did it for a short time period. But I also make mistakes as a man. And then step 3 is act and respond with intentionality. Once you've observed and reflected, take intentional action that aligns with emotional intelligence principles. All right? So the things that you learned here today, I want you to act accordingly. I want you to regulate your response. Instead of reacting emotionally, I want you to pause and choose your words and actions carefully. If someone is stressed, offer help or simply acknowledge their feelings. And follow through. Ensure your actions are consistent and they build trust. If you promise to support, deliver on that promise. That's a pretty good tip. All right, let's bring this all together. So, tying it all together, it's simply observe, reflect, and then act. Skipping observation leads to blind reactions, guys. Skipping reflection, it leads to misunderstanding. And skipping the action means no change or growth. So here's what I want you to do. Write down one situation daily where you apply the framework. For example, you observe, I noticed my coworker seemed distracted. You reflected on it and write this down. They've been working late all week. They might just be burnt out. And then write down what you did. So the act step is I checked in and I offered my help with the project that they're working on. So here's your call to action. I want you to start small. I want you to pick one of the emotional intelligence skills that I mentioned earlier, like empathy. And I want you to practice it every day this week. And I want you to notice how it changes your relationships at work and at home. Guys, emotional intelligence isn't about being soft. It's not. It's about being smart with our emotions. It's the bridge between your ambition at work and your purpose at home. So don't wait to feel understood. Lead the way by understanding yourself and others first. Guys, if you like this episode of the Fire Forge Leader podcast, make sure that you subscribe and hit that like button. Smash that subscribe button. Share it out across your network. I appreciate you guys, and go out there and lead with intention.
You have just experienced the heat and pressure of the forge. Remember, words without action are meaningless. Now, after the heat of the forge, shape your thoughts, quench your brain, then put your new tools to use, adding to your leadership. Tune in next week for more lessons from the forge.